Want to welcome a special guest to the Stack in the Box podcast, Lindsay Rhodes. You might remember her from her time at NFL Network, now doing the Rhodes Show, the podcast. You can check it out on Apple, anywhere you find your podcast. Also, we'll be working with DirecTV, part of the Sunday Ticket package, covering all things fantasy football. Lindsay, welcome to the
Yoo-hoo.
show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. So I want to get into, look, we're about to start the season. We're finally through the preseason. We are counting down the days. What is the most intriguing storyline that you're looking at as we enter the NFL season?
Where to begin? I feel like, first of all, thank God we're about to enter the season, right? Like, I think we've all had enough of the preseason, which we get so excited about. Yep. And then we quickly remember why the preseason sucks, but still it's fun for, fantasy scouting and stuff like that. I'm excited to see a lot of these young pieces on the field. From a fantasy standpoint, and then just, I think, off season, like so much of the off season, which I actually love, like I get super nerdy about the off season roster building. I think is super fun to talk about, the puzzle of it all. And so I'm intrigued to see how all of the off season changes and the new pieces that are in new places actually look. And that's a broad answer, but there are so many different teams that fit into that category. I'm interested to see the rookies and whether or not they're used in the way that we have been projecting that they will be used in for the last few months, who actually rises to the surface immediately and who takes a minute. From a team standpoint, I am excited about the Lions. I'm kind of like adopting them as one of my low end teams that I'm going to be a fan of this year, like buying the merch, all of that stuff. I'm in, restore the roar, hashtag all of it. I really like what they're building there. And I think that they're going to be maybe like an average team this year, which I think doesn't sound that exciting, but from where they're starting, I think that they're building something. And I think that they might be like a slightly above average, maybe even. I think that their win total in Vegas is set at 6.5 and went through the roster. I mean, I can find 9 wins for them. So, and like, it's not hard. Like I could find 9 wins for the Lions. I'm not saying that they're going to win 9, but I'm just saying, I think it might be there.
I want to find 9 wins, and then I find Jared Goff, and I'm like, you know what? I think 7. I think, but
yeah,
I think they're.
I think Jared Goff. Look, he's passable enough, right? Like he was with the Rams, and he got the Rams. Yeah, he didn't get the Rams. Let me rephrase that. The Rams got to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff as their quarterback. I don't think that he has gotten worse. I think that you could argue that Sean McVay utilizing Jared Goff is a little bit different than Dan Campbell at this stage in his head coaching career is different than using Jared Goff. But like, I think he's the guy that if you put the pieces around him, that he is good enough. Like he's never going to elevate you and he is going to hold you back from taking that last step and hoisting the Lombardi trophy. I don't think he's the guy. But when you put the weapons that I think that they have on that offense, their roster build is one that I am completely in on, right? Like I like how they've added pieces and how they've sort of slowly built to the point where now when you look at the Lions roster, it's not gross anymore. No. There are other teams that you could look at and go, I want no piece of any of these parts, right? But the Lions, that's not them. DeAndre Swift is an up and coming running back that I think we're all expecting to like burst onto the scene this year and be a legit running back that like from a fantasy standpoint, people are excited to use. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a revelation at the end of the year last year. I think that will continue once they can work in the rookie Williams, once he's back, then you've got pieces there. DJ Chark. I mean, point being, I don't think that they're bad anymore. And on the defensive side of the ball with Hutch, and then you've got Penei Sewell, I think the O-line is legit good. And then you go plug in the quarterback, right? Like once they're slightly above average this year, then they go plug in the quarterback next year. And then the Lions are a team that we're like, I don't know, maybe, then they become maybe like the Vikings. Maybe then they're that team that's like above average and they have the pieces and they could do it. Like, will they do it?
I'm fascinated by the Lions. I've been watching Hard Knocks. I'm sure everybody else has as well. If they're not, they should be. I think that show's gotten stale in recent years, but then with Dan Campbell, it's impossible to be stale. No, you're right though. They do have talent. TJ Hawkinson, another guy like and I spent, when I was out at the Super Bowl in LA, I spent 2 days with Aiden Hutchinson, excuse me. Yeah. And it was evident watching him, like whoever takes this kid, this is going to work out just fine. And he gets to stay home. He gets to be in Detroit. So that's great. One team I wanted to ask you about, because it seems that everybody has a different opinion on them, the Kansas City Chiefs. They have hosted 4 straight AFC title games. They are in, I think, what most people would agree is the toughest division in football. They've completely remade their receiver room. They've completely remade their defense. Of course, they still have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Do you think they're better? Do you think they're worse? Where do you fall on the Chiefs?
I don't think they're better. I'm not comfortable saying that they're worse yet, though. Like, they're a team that I definitely am interested in seeing week 1, because I'm curious to see how Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes use these pieces. I think that the pieces around them are good enough, right? Like, and you have obviously Travis Kelce, who is one of the best at his position, though statistically started to show signs toward like a downturn a little bit last year. But I think that logic would tell you that we should expect a high target volume for him, that he'll be heavily utilized with the offense, the way it's constructed now. I think that the wide receiver pieces don't necessarily beg a defense to play that too high shell that gave them a little bit of problems. And so I kind of think that with the weapons that they have around them, you could maybe lower your ADOT than, if you have Tyreek Hill streaking down the field, but then you can hit the right guy in space with separation who could pick up yards after the catch, so that they could still have that explosive offense, but it just kind of is created differently than like big play to Tyreek Hill. I think that Patrick Mahomes is a outstanding quarterback, and I think he can make a lot of things work. I have a lot of questions about it. I feel more confident about them than I do about the Packers for some reason. And I think that you could argue they had similar off seasons in that they have one of the hands down best quarterbacks in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. Yep. You took away easily their best wide receiver in each offense, and you didn't really replace them with anybody that feels like an adequate replacement. But there's something about the Packers that doesn't feel as like I can count on those wide receivers or those offensive parts to step up and fill the gap. Like Alan Lazard is a guy who you look at them and you go, okay, he's their number 1 wide receiver. Is he a number 1 wide receiver?
Right.
He's not. I think we've seen enough of him that yes, he'll get more volume this year. He'll have more opportunity, but like if he was that guy, Aaron Rodgers would have found ways to get him the ball more frequently and consistently, even with Devontae Adams on the field. He just would have. So I'm not sure that he is that guy. I think he's a strong number 2 wide. Maybe I don't even know if he's a strong wide number 2. I think he's a number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I'm kind of with you. I think the reason probably, and I don't want to speak for you, is the Chiefs still have Kelce. There's no like anchor to like on 3rd and 8, what the Chiefs will isolate Kelce. They will put him backside on a 3-by-1 look and say, we are going to match him up one-on-one. We will have Reed scheme up a way to do it, and we will hit him for 10 yards. Where with the Packers in January, when it's 3rd and 8, who is the ball going to? Because last year we saw that against the 49ers, even with Adams. They could not move the football, and now you take Adams out of the equation. I love the Packers defensively. I think they're going to be very good defensively. Yeah. Offensively, I'm not sure. I want to ask about the team actually the Kansas City's playing week 1, which is the Cardinals. They have had they've had a very strange offseason, which somehow went from the quarterback removing all mentions of the team from Instagram, then an all caps bulletin from his agent, Eric Burkhart, which then led to an extension. And at first you're like, okay, great. That's great news. Everything's good. 230 plus million, 160 million guaranteed. And then the next day happens. There's a homework clause that then gets taken out a day later. And you're kind of left wondering, like, do they believe in Kyler Murray? Did they feel like they just had to extend him because you're supposed to extend him? I feel personally like they're in for a little bit of a rough season. I just think this whole offseason has led to more questions and answers. Plus, you're without DeAndre Hopkins the first 6 weeks, and without him last year, they really struggled. Do you share that opinion, or do you think they're better than people are giving them credit for?
They're a funny one for me because this is a team no one's talked about in the offseason, aside from the drama, right? Like, this is not a team that people are like, like I've talked a lot about the Dolphins as being a team that might be sneaky good. Like, there are teams that are exciting to talk about. Like, The Cardinals are going to be better than the Lions, but I'm talking about the Lions. I'm not talking about the Cardinals. The Cardinals just fall into no man's land for me. I think that they are going to be a mid-tier team, but in this particular case, whereas I think the Dolphins will be a mid-tier team, I think that will be like an upgrade. And so we'll find that exciting. The Cardinals are a team with a quarterback like Kyler Murray. I think we want them to be one of the elite teams. And so when they fall into that mid-tier, or when things fall apart for them at the end of the season, whatever, you are disappointed. And so you just kind of are left wanting for more from the Cardinals. And I still feel that way. I don't feel excited. I don't see any reason to be excited about them going into the season. I think Kyler Murray is an above average quarterback in the NFL with the potential to be very, very good, but we haven't seen it from him yet. We haven't seen him taking those steps, like comp wise. If you're like, oh, a guy who can do both things, would you rather have Lamar Jackson or would you rather have Kyler Murray? I think from a tier standpoint, right, he's still below that. And we want him to be that by this stage in his career. So I do think that the Cardinals kind of found themselves in a situation where I'm not sure, they haven't shown us that they are in love with Kyler Murray. And frankly, I don't know that we've seen reason for them to be in love with Kyler Murray. I think that there's enough, he kind of puts them in a weird like limbo where they have a good enough quarterback that you have to pay him and you can't move on because are you sure you're going to get better than Kyler Murray? But also you don't necessarily have an elite quarterback. So when you have to pay him like he is one, that could crush your roster build. Like I don't envy the position that they're in. I do think, Marquise Brown, I think he's going to be good with them. And I think that connection, the fact that they've played together so frequently, I think that Marquise Brown is somebody who's going a little bit underlooked going into this season. I think that he will be a good weapon for them. Rondell Moore is in that year where you're supposed to start. Yeah. The growth should happen for him. And so I think he could be very interesting out of the gate before they have DeAndre Hopkins back. But they took a step backward from a running back room standpoint with Chase Edmonds and James Conner. I'd rather have that than James Conner and Benjamin or Darrell Williams, like whichever one they want to go with. I think Connor is due for a touchdown regression. He's not going to score touchdowns in LaDainian Tomlinson type clip. That's just not going to happen. He's not that guy. So I feel like we have more reasons to be disappointed kind of in like what they've done to prepare for this season than excited. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to be good. I'm not necessarily expecting them to be. I think they're going to be a pretty much like mid-tier average to slightly above average team. I don't think they'll be bad. I just don't think they'll be great.
I agree with you on that contract breakdown with Murray. I think the Cardinals, if they could have, would have been really behooved to wait another year and see how that played out. I also think once they extended Kingsbury, if you're Murray, you're like, you better extend me now because I've shown you more as a quarterback than Kingsbury's shown you as a coach. I want to ask quickly on a few different things. So of all the teams, when I look at them, the two teams I have the hardest time figuring out what the hell they're going to be.
Okay.
Denver, San Francisco. San Francisco because of the quarterback.
Yeah.
Denver because of everything changing. Now, obviously, they're better. No question they're better. But everything changes. You go from a defensive coach to an offensive coach. His defense regress. Russell Wilson comes in. He's a hell of a lot better than Drew Lock. What is he compared to what he's been in the past? If I said to you, who are you more confident in being a legitimate contender come January? San Francisco, Denver, who you got?
San Francisco. Okay. San Francisco. Why? And it's just tied to the coaching staff. Like we've seen it from them. We've seen them turn people over. Like who's their wide receiver this year? I don't know. It's going to be somebody. Who's the running back? I don't know, but it's going to be somebody. Like the way that they've dealt with injury, turnover, and just plugging guys in, it feels to me like the scheme and the coaching and all that stuff is put in place to have success. Plug in parts, right? And they've got a lot riding on Trey Lance this year. I think they took a huge gamble by giving up so many assets to go up and move him in the draft. I think they had to plug him in this year, but it's really risky. He better be good because Jimmy Garoppolo was good enough, and we saw that, right? Not that Jimmy Garoppolo is a great quarterback in the NFL, but he was good enough to get them to a point where they were a highly competitive team. Was he good enough to get them like way over the top, like we were talking about? Probably not. I think they did need to upgrade at the quarterback position, but then they need Trey Lance to be the upgrade at the quarterback position. I just think that they'll coach him into good spots.
I agree. I think the funny thing is with the Niners, in a weird way, Jimmy G almost should give fans solace. Like, you were 7 minutes away from winning the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey Lance doesn't have to be Josh Allen.
Yeah.
He just has to be good. And if he's good with that team, with that coaching staff, they can win.
He has to be the right kind of good too, though. Like, he has to, I mean, and I was going to say not make mistakes. Jimmy notoriously made mistakes at the worst possible time. So they can even metabolize that. But like, there were certain things that he did that they asked him to do that he did well, right? Like, he was a good ball distributor. It's not sexy, but he ran the offense so that he didn't get in their way a lot. Like, he wasn't value added, but he didn't get in their way all too frequently. We need Trey Lance to not get in their way. And then in a perfect world, also add value. But like, you can't be that guy that can't make the easy plays. You need to be efficient. You need to be accurate. This is like our baseline here. Okay. Now you've met that. Now let's see what you can do in all of the flashy ways to then add value to this offense and take them over the top.
All right. NFC East, Cowboys, the Eagles. I think most people would agree those are the two teams. I don't think anybody's picking the Giants, and the Commanders are what they are until proven otherwise. Who do you like in that division? Obviously, both made the playoffs last year. Eagles didn't beat one team with a playoff resume. Then they get in the playoffs to get spanked. Dallas can't stop taking penalties. Lost a lot this offseason. You have McCarthy sort of oddly, weirdly on the hot seat. It feels like if they don't win a playoff game, Sean Payton, it might be there next year.
I don't even think it's oddly. I think 100% he's on the hot seat, and I haven't seen any reason to not put him there. I like the Cowboys more. I think it's a weird division because I'm not that excited about the Cowboys, but I put them in a good team category for sure. They're just like good, but less exciting. You know what I mean? Like, not the team that you want to like rave about in the off season. And I think also there's a sense that like Cowboys fans have, and probably the rest of us collectively, that like something is going to happen that is negative when it comes to the Cowboys. So you have a hard time putting them over the top. And they didn't do anything like from a roster build standpoint, they didn't get better, obviously, this offseason. I don't think I see that. So they might have made some really good moves. Tolbert might end up being great. If Gallup comes back and he's healthy, then like, did you lose a lot with Amari Cooper? I don't know. It was probably a really smart front office move to dump the salary. But from a pure football standpoint, I don't see signs that say like, this is the team. They're like ready to take it all the way at this point. But historically, we know what Dak can do. Zeke and Pollard are a good enough backfield. I think I have more confidence that they will meet like the floor that I'm expecting from them. The Eagles are a little bit more variable for me. Like, the range of outcomes is greater, and it's all tied to Jalen Hurts. But I just think you have a really good team right now. And so it's all riding on whether or not Jalen is good. Kind of like Tua with the Dolphins. Those two teams are very similar to me right now, because I think they built them so that we're going to get a really good read on the quarterback. We're going to get our answers in both cases. And I think that there is a greater chance than not that Jalen Hurts will rise to the occasion and look much better. So I like the Eagles a lot. I just, if you, gun to my head said you have to pick one of these teams, I would say the Cowboys.
I really like the comparison. I agree completely with the Eagles and the Dolphins. They're the exact same team. They've loaded up, and they're basically saying, if these quarterbacks don't work out this year, we can then go and we can draft a guy. Now, the Dolphins had 2 first-round picks for the tampering charges. The Eagles still do. It's a quarterback-loaded class next year. At least everybody believes it's going to be. Right. So those teams are set up. If they need a quarterback, they can go get one, especially Philly. All right, last question for you. Super Bowl. Who is your pick? Who's going to get there and who's going to win?
So the two teams I feel most confident about across the board going into the season are the Bills and the Bucks. So, but that feels like a really boring Super Bowl pick to me. I want to pick the Chargers. I want to put the Chargers in the Super Bowl. But I can't decide if that's more like a betting underdog, sexy story. I think it doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to go Chargers, Bucks in the Super Bowl, even though I do think that the Bills, I'm more confident Like the Chargers are like a little bit of a projection, right? They made some moves. We are assuming that Justin Herbert is going to continue to grow. We're going to assume that they're going to figure out that his ADOT should be a little bit longer because he has the arm. Like he's like throwing it all dinks and dunks last year, which doesn't make any sense. I think Staley, I like Staley. I'm higher on him than I think the field is. So I think I'm going to go Chargers because that's who I want to root for. That's like the exciting play. Gosh. And then I'm going to pick the Chargers to win.
Okay. I have the Bills and the Bucks. I have the Bills winning. I think
if I was going Bills Bucks, I would take Bills winning. And I think that's a much safer bet. The Chargers are just fun because it's less like everyone's picking the Bills and the Bucks. Everybody.
The Chargers, I think if you said who's got the most talented roster from 1 through 10 in the whole league, I might pick the Chargers. The problem I have with the Chargers is they haven't gotten to the playoffs.
I know.
At some point, can you win a game that matters? Can you win one game? I love Herbert. Herbert's amazing. And I think Staley's going to be a good head coach. But they're one of those teams, like, for an example, early in the year they played Jacksonville. And I'm like, well, they'll beat Jacksonville by 30 points. But it's also the kind of team you look at and you're like, will they beat Jacksonville? Or will that be the game that Trevor Lawrence throws for like 400 yards and 5 touchdowns?
Who did the Chargers lost to a team like that last year? Wasn't it the Texans?
Yeah, with the Texans.
You're like, what's happening?
Guys on COVID.
Yeah. I know.
25 guys on COVID, and Houston scored 40 points.
I know.
So I'm taking the Bills. A, I think they're the best team. And B,
yes,
I just think it's one of those, it's like it's their time. They had Kansas City beat last year. I have to imagine 13 seconds is emblazoned in their brains. 100%. It almost feels like if they don't win this year, then you start looking at them going, is there something wrong? Is something amiss? So look, I hear you. I think the NFC to me is the harder one to pick because everybody's got a flaw. You can take the Rams, you can take the Bucks. I don't know who the hell.
They're easier because there's nobody else. Like it's the Bucks and the Rams. Like who else in the NFC are you like, no, this is the team?
I'd almost pick the Packers because I love their defense. But I can't get past the way they've been in January.
Like the Packers are going to go to the Super Bowl after getting rid of Devontae Adams with nobody catching the ball. Like I'm like drafting Robert Tonyan in leagues because I think that he's the best. Like I think he's an undervalued asset this year because Aaron Rodgers values what he feels confident in. Like, are you going to catch the ball if I throw it to you? I feel like this might be the year that he uses more of like a security blanket type guy because he gets frustrated at everybody else. Like there's reports about him sitting there and just waiting to see who comes up to him and talk to him. Like he's not the personality that brings along these guys and is like, you guys, it's us versus the NFL. Like it just doesn't make I don't see it as much. I can see like Patrick Mahomes working these guys and coaching them up and in a way where like it does feel more like a team. I don't know.
The AFC is going to be a gauntlet. It's probably going to come down to who is healthiest and who gets a little bit of luck, who has that penalty at the wrong time, who drops. I mean, look, the Rams won the Super Bowl last year. If Jaquiski Tartt catches that pick in the fourth quarter of that NFC title game, it's probably a different world, but he doesn't. And the Rams won, and that's the way everybody will remember it.
The Bengals making it there. Like, it's just like nobody was expecting it. You got to get into the dance. And the Bengals are another team. I think I feel highly confident are going to be very, very good this year. I know everybody's expecting like all the math says regression. I don't see it. Like, just look at the roster. Like who on that, where's their hole? Where's the part of the team that you're like, boy, if they'd only upgrade here, like they did the upgrade this offseason.
Yeah,
they're gonna.
I was actually going to ask you about them earlier, but I knew we were short on time. I agree with you. I think the Bengals. Everybody keeps thinking they're going to win like 9 or 8 games this year. I don't see it at all.
Nope.
When you have that quarterback and those weapons and a better offensive line, you're going to win games. Now, I think Baltimore is going to have something to say in that division now that they're healthy. But Cincinnati's loaded. You're not as high on Baltimore.
Who are they throwing the ball? Well, I just have questions about Baltimore. I have faith in that coaching staff, right?
Yes.
Like. Yes. So in the same way that Sean Payton always got like the Saints could trot out anybody and you're like, I don't like this roster at all, but like they always had a winning record and they were always there in the playoff mix. And I'm like, it's just Sean Payton, right? Like he can do anything with anybody. I feel that way about John Harbaugh. They're not going to lose games in all those small ways that other teams might make a mistake here or there that loses them the game. That's not what the Ravens are going to do. The Ravens they're going to like hit all of those things out of the park, special teams, all of that stuff. They're going to be great. What I'm not sure about though, is that yes, Lamar Jackson, if he's healthy, he's dynamic. He brings a lot to the table. He's so hard to, all of that. I get it. But like the pass catching weapons, I'm like, how do you bring this roster into, it's the same with the Packers and the Chiefs, where it's just hard for me to get excited about it. It might work. And I know that you don't value the pass against the run. Like that's not what you're trying to do, but we're like, hey, Devin Duvernay and James Prochet and boy, Rashad Bateman, you better hit,
that's like, concerning. Yes.
I don't know. I'm seeing more too tight situations that make sense for them because the pass catchers don't sell me. Isaiah Likely in the preseason. And again, this is a preseason. Like, how do you gauge what you saw there? But he looked pretty exciting. So maybe you go Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and he's kind of like a wide receiver who plays tight end. Maybe you take that approach. They drafted a couple of tight ends, which tells me that might be something that strategically they were looking for people at that position. Same with the Cardinals, who did the same thing. You're like, are they looking to switch up their looks in that way so that we might see these people? Is that a sign that we might see these people on the field more because they're purposely looking for them? I think that might be the case with them. But it's just hard for me to get excited about the Ravens being a lot better. Like they always have the chance because Lamar Jackson's dynamic and John Harbaugh's a stud. But
I think they'll be really good in the regular season. I think January, the same problem. Like where you have to be able to win more than one way. But in November and December, when you're playing Pittsburgh, who can't score, then I think you have a shot to win. I think Baltimore's going to win a lot of regular season games. But I think if they play Kansas City or the Chargers or the Bills, or the Bengals, you run into that same problem of like, you got to be able to score and get chunk plays. That's my concern with them. I think in the regular season, they can do it. You play a lot of teams that are just going to be better than, and they can outcoach. It's harder to do that in the playoffs. That said, we have kept you for a half an hour. And Lindsay Rhodes, I appreciate you so much. Check out the NFL Roadshow, Lindsay's podcast. You can find it anywhere podcasts are. Also, make sure to check out her work on DirecTV on the Sunday Ticket Package, talking all things fantasy. Lindsay, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.